he seems to have multiple properties and he is looking for options to secure and manage the properties in such a way that he can pass it on safely to the next generation.
Especially if you have children, you need to have a trust. And you don't, this is not a do it yourself job. I mean, I really feel like you put a lot of liability on your lap when you don't trust a qualified attorney to do that kind of work for you. It's worth every penny to do it right.
Another myth that people have is, oh, I am not rich or I have only one house, I shouldn't get a will or my estate planning. That's a myth because the quick rule of thumb, you want every rental property to be on an LLC. Second part is, okay, should I have one LLC per home? What if you have like 20 homes? For your wealth strategy, you need to have a terrific real estate agent, you need to have a terrific mortgage broker, you need to have a good financial plan, you need to have a good accountant, you need to have an attorney.
So this medical directive, if you don't have kids, then the property goes to So this question is from Deepak and I love the question. It's a good problem to have. So he seems to have multiple properties and he is looking for options to secure and manage the properties in such a way that he can pass it on safely to the next generation. So he's asking whether setting up an LLC is a good option or setting up a trust is a good option, or what are some of the other options and which ones are good ones, which ones are not so good. Any suggestions for him?
I'm going through this right now because I'm updating my trust, and if you're gonna have a good financial plan for your future, with especially if you have children, you need to have a trust, and you don't. This is not a do-it-yourself job. I mean, I really feel like you put a lot of liability on your lap when you don't trust a qualified attorney to do that kind of work for you. It's worth every penny to do it right. And then LLCs, what that does is it protects that individual property so that if somebody were to sue you, they can't go after other assets. So LLCs are an important thing to do. Sometimes if you have multiple properties, you may be setting it up with multiple LLCs owned by an S Corp, and it gets a little more complex and you need some tax advice at that point. But definitely starting with a trust, your medical directives, and and LLCs are very important if you own more than one property. Sometimes you can get away with, on your first rental property, maybe you don't have the LLC set up, but it's always the preferred way to go because it protects you.
What is the medical directive?
Medical directive is pull the plug. If I'm a vegetable and I got in a bad car wreck and I can't feed myself anymore, a medical directive, when you're working with your trust person, a lot of times they'll help you put stuff like that together too. And it just lets your spouse or your family know what your wishes are if you're ever in a bad situation medically. So,
See, you have like a terrific question. Another myth that people have is, oh, I am not rich or I have only one house, I shouldn't get a will or my estate planning in place. That's a myth because the way it works is, I've done a lot of research because I've gone through 3 attorneys to put together my will and my trust. We own multiple properties. Having the will and trust is extremely important. Not just for Lallu Prasad Yadav who has a lot of assets. It's for even a Lallu. You really need this thing to happen. Okay, the quick rule of thumb, okay. You want every rental property to be on an LLC. Okay. LLC is a limited liability company, but it doesn't end there. There is more to it. Granted, I'm not an attorney, and probably me and Ann know much more than a lot of attorneys out there because we see this day in and day out. If you have the LLC, right? LLC is like a protective shell wherein you put the title of the home in the LLC. So the LLC protects you. But then it doesn't end there. You need to have a separate bank account created for that LLC, and all the rent has to go into that LLC, and all the expenses have to go out of the LLC, the bank account.
Okay.
So that in case there is some lawsuit happening in relation to the house.
Mhm.
Let's say somebody slips in the house, they could file a lawsuit on the landlord saying that it's because of the negligence of the landlord. So then when they sue, if the LLC is the owner, they can only sue the LLC. And so that the owner's other assets
Mhm.
are totally shielded from that,
Okay.
right? So that is one part of the LLC. The second part is, okay, should I have one LLC per home? What if you have like 20 homes, right? So the way that we did it was, the rule of thumb is this: it depends on the equity of the house. Again, in the example wherein if there is a lawsuit, then all the assets of that LLC get consumed in the lawsuit.
Mhm.
If you have one paid off house,
Mhm.
it's in a separate LLC, and then if you have three different houses wherein you have three different mortgages on it, it doesn't have as much equity.
Mhm.
So having the LLC for all the three together and one LLC is okay, because you have the first lien, which is the lender.
Mhm.
So first lien holder has the first right on the house, even if there is a lawsuit. And if they don't have too many assets, then it's okay to have one LLC for multiple.
Okay.
Then all the LLCs are there, and then trust is the one that owns these LLCs. So you can basically inherit the trust. Your kids can inherit the trust, and you don't have to pass each home to them. So the entire trust, so the trustee owns the trust and they control the trust. So then the new beneficiary basically will be the new person. Like if my wife is the beneficiary of our trust right now, if we pass, then our kids will become the beneficiaries. So there will be no probate. It's much easier. But to oversimplify this is a crime, I would think. You need to get an attorney
Yeah.
to properly put it together, and then you need to review it every year.
Another layer too to add to it, if you have a rental property and it's very inexpensive to do, and the attorney that I just worked with on the LLC for a rental property I have had reminded me of this. It's not something I didn't know, but it's just adding an umbrella policy on your insurance plan. It's very, very inexpensive. And that way, if somebody were to die at the property or something of that nature, you have maybe $1 million umbrella policy on top of your rental. So it just prevents a really crazy bad
Yeah.
lawsuit. And so the insurance policy is also another factor. But lining those up will also assure harmony with your family moving forward. Because if you and your wife were to pass away, if you have that trust, everybody knows what the plan is. And kids aren't fighting over a piece of furniture at the end of the day. And stuff isn't going through probate and taking forever to benefit your children with the money that you might have saved. So
As part of creating this trust and LLC, right, the way I did it is, basically that's an opportunity for us to document everything.
Mm.
If we don't have this formal trust or the will plan, right, trust and LLCs is for asset. There are like two different things we are talking about. LLCs is for asset protection,
Mhm.
right? Then trust is to make sure that the LLCs are being inherited properly without probate. But they are two different things, two different animals, but we try to tackle both at one shot, because usually the trust and the will attorney is the same. And as part of the will, when you're going for the will, they'll also do this vegetative state, like healthcare power of attorney. You do all that if you become incapacitated, who is going to take orders on your
Mhm.
behalf and all that, right? So you package and do everything at one shot.
I helped a lady that her husband died and they thought they were really prepared, and there's so many things. I mean, she couldn't even get access to her bank accounts because that wasn't set up properly, and and the trust information wasn't with the bank. So she couldn't get any access to funds for a significant amount of time. Then she ran into a problem with the vehicle, because the vehicle she couldn't get access to because only her husband's name was on that
Oh.
vehicle. So there's so many things that if you do proper planning, then you leave a spouse behind and they're not struggling to get a car or a little bit of money out of the bank. I mean, and those things can be a real problem if you don't plan right.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the other episode that we did on who is your team, right?
Mhm.
For your wealth strategy, you need to have a terrific real estate agent.
Mhm.
You need to have a terrific mortgage broker. You need to have a good financial planner. You need to have a good accountant. You need to have an attorney who can do all that. Because even if you are part of AZFitness group, what if you pass away suddenly? What's going to happen to all these assets? Your wife should get access to the Bank of America where you stashed away $120,000 for your kids' education. All this is extremely important,
True.
and people tend to ignore It's a great question, and I would thank you for bringing it up. I just told you that this is extremely important. You have to do. There is no right or wrong way to have the LLCs in different ways. But if you have a suggestion, the best person to advise is a good, experienced attorney.
It's not that expensive too. If you really, I mean, even if you feel like I don't really have that much, I just have my house and one rental property, let's say. Well, you still want to have this plan in place because God forbid anything happens, where do your kids go? You know, what happens to them? And how does the person, you know, maybe they're younger, who's in charge of helping make sure the transition happens? And if you don't lay these things out, nobody knows what to do if that happens.
Yeah, if something happens like that, and if the wife cannot get access to the account, not only is she grieving the husband, she's going to be so mad at the husband who passed away. So you don't want to your wife to get angry when you're dead. So you better put everything in place.
Yeah. So, what are some of the laws that come into picture? For example, you mentioned car. You won't have access to car. It's a possibility if the spouse's name is not there, and then bank accounts. You lose access to bank accounts, or it might be greatly delayed if there is no proper documentation. And I mean that is going to be the first thing if something like that happens in a family. Funds is the first thing they would need access to, so that they can they'll have a lot of arrangements to do. It's unfortunate situations, but like from the practical side, that's the first thing they would need. And then the investment accounts, your properties. What are some of the laws that come into picture immediately once that happens?
In general, in Arizona, it's considered a community property state. I'm going to actually bring an attorney next time wherein we can talk about all the details. Since it's a community property state, that means if you're married, if you buy any assets, by default, wife and husband own it.
Okay.
But what if wife and husband pass away? The kids have to get access too, right? So we are talking the next level. The kids are younger than 18, over than 18. Then what if you have two marriages? You have children from there, children from here. So it gets overcomplicated. So I think it's best that we oversimplify it and say, talk to an attorney, get this handled.
Yeah. If you have kids, I mean, you just have to. You probably have to have a life insurance policy, a trust, and if you have a rental, an LLC. If you do those three things, you should be at least prepared, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't have kids, then the property goes to whom? Like
by default, your wife.
No, I mean if both
pass away, the government
away,
takes it.
Government takes it.
Yeah. Exactly. It goes to the government. They sell it and they make the money. Because there is no heirs, right? There is no heirs. There is nobody who are willing to who can claim ownership of any of that.
Next to kin, I thought, okay, I would. I mean, if you have a brother you like or a sister, I mean, I would probably be putting them in line. You know?
I mean, all that has to be documented. Otherwise, it's going to go to probate and all that. See,
and attorneys will take a lot of your money.
Yeah, attorneys will take a lot of money because somebody has to process it. If somebody has 100,000 and they just pass away, then the attorney will. I mean, somebody will say, "Oh, I have that 100,000." Then they have to go to the state and prove. And attorney takes 20,000-30,000 of that. If you have only 30,000, then you might as well give it to the government.
I saw one. This is several years ago where we bought a property, and some of the money went. The guy had no children, so some of the money went to some nieces and nephews. But then he had, I think he had like 70% of it go to Phoenix Children's Hospital. So he donated a significant amount to a charity that he liked. And so I don't think the family was so happy about that, but but so you can do whatever you want, but just so the directive is what your wish would have been, I would work with an attorney even when you don't have kids.
Yeah. Even if you are not married, I would just get with the attorney and say, okay, I'm not married, but if something happens to me tomorrow, this is how I want it. I want it to go to my brother in India, or this is his name, whatever, this is his address, so that government at least can try to reach them. If there is no information, nothing, I mean, you can't do anything.
That is true.